Well, this morning, President Trump's preparing a legal challenge after the Colorado Supreme Court disqualified him from the state Republican primary, ruling he violated the Constitution on January 6, 2021.
We have Kurt Bardella, Asia Grace, and Colby Hall here to talk about this historic ruling. And I'm going to start with you, Kurt, because you are our voice in terms of speaking to politics. And this happened to be controversial for some because all of the judges in this Colorado Supreme Court were appointed by Democrats. So is there any basis, taking away bias, that voters could feel like this is a politically motivated move to delay or deny President Trump for running?
Oh, I definitely think that some voters will certainly feel that way. But I mean, on the flip side of it, when Supreme Court make decisions that are based on Republicans who appointed those justices to the Supreme Court, I mean, it doesn't invalidate those decisions even when we disagree with them. Ultimately, the Supreme Court will be the arbiter of how this plays out. It's been interesting watching so many Republicans react to this, saying, the people should decide, the people's vote should count. This is what should determine who's on a ballot, who wins an election. And I was saying to that, like, okay, I'm for the people deciding. So would that mean you would be okay ditching the Electoral College and just switching to a complete popular vote and letting the people's will decide? Which one is it?
Yeah, we know a lot of the other GOP candidates have come forward and said that, this is basically a farce for democracy, kind of taking sides with President Trump here. Colby, let me go to you. This will most certainly get taken up by the U.S. Supreme Court eventually and quickly, with the primary just around the corner. Obviously, they have a conservative majority. I can't imagine that they uphold this ruling. I mean, what say you, and what were your initial thoughts last night when this broke?
I agree that not much will come from this because the U.S. Supreme Court will likely overturn it. What's interesting to me, a couple things. One is that this is kind of a states' rights issue. States' rights have long been sort of the battle cry for conservatives within the courts, but also politically. So this sort of flips it on its head. I do think that this is a big political win for Trump. And I cite Trump's polls over the last year. People forget in the first 4 or 5 months, he was in a steady and significant decline in the polling. And then it sharply turned when Alvin Bragg filed the suits against Trump. And since then, everything that we've gone, the Democrats or lawsuits that have gone against Trump have made him stronger. So this really plays into his sort of they're out to get me complex, which it resonates with his base.
Is it a complex anymore if it continues to happen? Asia, I'm going to talk to you here. There are 12 states that still have challenges to Mr. Trump's candidacy. How is this being perceived in the public?
Well, a lot of people are looking at this entire movement as a very unabashed buy-wig moment to the former head of state. A lot of people definitely feel that, anyone that's accused of a crime should obviously, of course, go through due process, and that's judicial. That's the standard here. But sometimes the court of public opinion does prevail. It does move faster than the court of law. And a lot of people online, a lot of people in the media, they feel that, this movement by Colorado echoes those 12 lawsuits that are out there wanting him to be banned from the ballot. So we'll see what the U.S. Supreme Court decides, but it's very controversial, obviously.
Yeah, it is certainly a moment. Okay, speaking of the court of public opinion, court of law, let's move on to our next topic, and that's Jeffrey Epstein this morning, because there's a major update in that sex trafficking case. A judge ordering court documents to be unsealed, including the names of dozens of Epstein's associates. This could be more than 170 names. And Republican Congressman Tim Burchett joined our show earlier this morning. I want to play a quick sound bite and then talk to y'all on the other side.
What they're releasing right now, the flight records are one thing. What we want is the client list. I think that's what you need. This complete cover-up of the uniparty, as we call it in Washington. You've got Republicans and Democrats on that thing, and if they're dirtbags, I say put them out there. Put them in the court of public opinion, because those people, dadgummit, this thing has just gone on too long.
Yeah, and a lot of people certainly agree with him. Kurt, let me start with you on this one. What would be the hesitancy or even the argument to keep some of these obviously the children's names, kept under wraps, but what's the hesitancy or the argument to keep some of these adult names under wraps? Why not release them? Why is that not obvious?
Yeah, I'm with you. If you are one of these, as he called it, dirtbags who participated in this depraved, terrible, illegal, illicit behavior, you don't deserve the cloak of anonymity. You should be exposed for the predator that you are. And you should have to face that and not be able to avail yourself of anonymity because what you have participated in, knowingly engaged in, is absolutely reprehensible and disgusting. And everyone should know the type of person that you are and suffer those consequences.
We certainly have not yet seen the end of the adage of birds of a feather flock together. But just because someone's on some of these documents does not make them guilty or culpable in any sex trafficking that we know of yet. But Colby, I'm going to ask you, do you think that Jeffrey Epstein has become so large in the cultural conversation that we're perhaps not aware or ignoring cases similar to this case where there's another Epstein who's still alive, who's doing the same things?
I think sex trafficking and sort of perverts and dirtbags will continue to exist. What makes this unique is that he was really flying with the most powerful and wealthiest set. And, to Kurt's point and what Tim Burchett said on your show earlier, a divided nation is pretty much united in getting to the bottom of this. I will say that Julie K. Bowen was the reporter in Miami Herald who initially broke this story. She went on Twitter and revealed that she thinks that the list of names, she poured cold water. We're not going to see necessarily a lot of clients list. So I think we should measure our expectations. Yeah. It's a good first step, but I think more steps should come.
Yeah, Asia Grace, I know you have thoughts on this too. The other thought I kept having was if these names are unearthed and they're about to see the light of day, I mean, careers, families are about to be destroyed.
Absolutely. I mean, these public figures are more than likely going to be running to file those appeals faster than Flojo on a pogo. I mean, I think that if they do get their names redacted, it will be nothing short of a Christmas miracle. This country has certainly taken on this unyielding stance of, holding any wrongdoers accountable, especially since the Me Too movement. And this move from the judge definitely turned that stance up several notches. And I love that for the victims. Anyone seeking justice in this case, they should definitely have their day and have their accusers brought to justice.
Yeah, it's just interesting. There's nothing unique about what he did, I would have to say. The powerful wielding their power unlawfully and victimizing people, that's not unique. I think it's the fact that we get to see all their dirty laundry for the first time up close and personal. And of course, everybody wants accountability. Let's talk about the border, a place where we're seeing a record number of illegal crossings, especially happening this week in Eagle Pass, Texas, where we have one of our crews there, Jorge Ventura, has been reporting more than 4,000 immigrants have crossed in a single day at that location. They were averaging just 2,000 people a day. I don't know that that's comforting. But in terms of, Kurt, I think about this all the time, and we've been seeing more images of immigrants placed on planes. There are people who are upset because you've got passengers who are saying, look at all these people that our tax dollars are spending money to take them to cities that they desire to go to. Again, there's a lot of compassion needed in this conversation. I'm just trying to figure out why we got to a place in our country where we have politicized this so much that someone like Texas Governor Greg Abbott is vilified for doing the same exact thing that the federal government and NGOs have been doing for countless years. And now we still don't have any measure from Congress to solve the problem. So what's next?
Yeah, I think that this is just one of the most long-running public policy failures of both Republican and Democrat politics. I mean, I feel like we've been having a conversation about immigration and the border, certainly for as long as I have been in politics. I remember the very first congressional race I worked on was in San Diego, obviously a border state community. The primary issue that is the reason why my candidate won was on immigration, on addressing illegal immigration. And here we are all these years later. I mean, that was back in 2006. Here we are more than 15 years later, and we're still having the identical conversation about fixing this problem that we've been having for so long. And at some point, the American people should look at both parties and go, what the hell are you guys doing? Yeah. You just talk about it, but you don't do anything to solve it.
It's true.
Yeah. And, Colby, we've been checking in with Jorge Ventura every morning for the whole week on that group behind him that keeps amassing by the hour. CBP closing down 2 international railway crossings because of it to divert those officers elsewhere for processing. What should the White House response be right now, aside from just slamming Texas Governor Greg Abbott for that new law he signed into action this week that makes it a state crime to come in illegally now. What should the White House response be?
Well, they should address it. I mean, what they've done thus far is nothing short of an abject failure. I think they saw the sort of extreme family separation policies of the Trump administration as too far, and then the pendulum swung too far the other way. Again, this is another issue that unites a divided country. Everyone sees this border crisis, and people complained about Governor Abbott and DeSantis using busloads and planes of immigrants as props and sending them to sort of blue sanctuary cities. But that was remarkably effective. We have to admit that. And the Biden administration has just sort of ignored this. And they need to address it. They need to address it like a national crisis that it is. And honestly, I think they've really hurt themselves politically because they've ignored it. And it's a shame.
Well, and you see these images, Asia, I'm just going to ask you, in terms of people actually seeing proof of it, because for so long in media, you only really heard rumblings of it, or you had to search through the internet to get to the bottom of this immigration story. A lot of people didn't want to touch it because they didn't want to touch the politics of it. Are people's minds changing because they see in real time how many people are crossing the border and how much need there is?
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, the image is the cover of today's Post. I mean, it's jarring to see that many people, standing in lines trying to figure out what's next. And we know that the border is just not fully supported enough to manage as many people that are trying to enter into the country. And honestly, people at the highest levels, they got to get their hands involved. They got to get their hands dirty. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a new result. And like Kurt said, this conversation has been ongoing for years, over a decade, and nothing has changed. And at this point, regardless of where you are in the argument, either side of the issue, no one is getting the land of milk and honey. It's giving mold and scummy. Like, we need to do something to help us all.
Yeah, there are a lot of communities in the United States who are saying, okay, what about us too? What about us? Taking care of them is great, but what about our communities?
Well.
And we don't have this never-ending gold stash in Washington. Kurt, Asia, Colby, we appreciate you being here. Great conversation.